hydrofield cuts through my neighborhood. Check. Can you hear her now? That work better? Hello.
Oh, see, now that's lining up.
Check 1, 2. Hello. I think it should be working now.
Now? Now can you guys hear me? We're getting a yes? Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fearlessly Authentic. I'm Lucky. And we have Steve.
What's up?
And tonight we have a watch along episode, and it's about letting women speak and talking about gender and what's happening. And this is actually from Australia, and it's from their government there. So these ladies they held it in the parliament. So I'm going to be putting that on the screen, and this is what we're going to be doing a watch along with. Is why can't women talk about sex and addressing the war on women who speak out for sex-based rights? Super important. And I was really touched by the stories. I watched it already, but we're gonna watch it. We're gonna play it tonight, and hopefully you guys will watch it along with us. So I'm gonna mute us and play this, and I might pause it throughout. I'm not sure if I'm going to pause it or if we'll just let it play and we'll talk after. Yeah.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much for coming, everybody. I'd very much like to thank our 8 speakers, 8 of the most courageous people in Australia. I would normally refer to them as the 8 most courageous women in Australia, but I should say they're the 8 most courageous. Okay, look, okay. Here we go. Okay, security. Look, we're here for free speech. Security, please.
These are the parliamentary security guys. We're the parliamentary people.
Well, don't go there.
So that, yeah.
Okay, everybody, let's not manhandle them. They're looking for attention. The security's here. Let's just all be good. Let's not be mean to them. You've had your say. You've had your say. Thank you. Thank you.
Our point exactly.
Okay, well, yes, Caroline Smith is right. This is what we're here to say, that this is a free speech event.
Yes.
And these people want to suppress free speech. Now, the issue about the trans debate in this country and all around the world is that there is no debate. Now, what we had in 2015, we had the United States Supreme Court find a constitutional right to same-sex marriage, and then very quickly all around the world, legislatures passed same-sex marriage. And now then as soon as that happened, we then have this new debate come along, which is called the trans debate. Now, we believe it is an important debate. And we believe that both sides should be heard respectfully. And that's not happening in this country.
Correct.
Okay, now my party, the Liberal Democrats, we were the first political party in this country to be in favour or to be in favour of changing the law so there could be same-sex marriage. And we don't make a moral call on whether that's a good or a bad thing, but we do believe in maximising human freedom. And that's what today is about. We believe that this debate is a debate that is important. And so we're very grateful to have these wonderful people with us. I'd normally refer to them as women, but of course, today I have to refer to them as people with uteruses. But anyway, now our first speaker and our MC for the day is the fabulous Catherine Deves. Catherine.
Right, so I would like to acknowledge you all here today. Thank you for coming to this brave space and joining these women. Thank you to John Ruddick for hosting us here in the Jubilee Room at New South Wales Parliament. Right, so talking about sex has always been controversial, but never like this. And because it has been so controversial, we've sanitised it from the lexicon. Women on this panel today have each had a unique experience where the apparatus of the state, the courts, disciplinary committees, quasi-judicial bodies and campaigns of social ostracism have been weaponised in an effort to silence them. My own experience galvanises me, and it strengthens my resolve to continue the legacy of the women who have gone before me to maintain a system of sex-based rights. We embody inclusivity and diversity, political, familial, sexual, marital, social, economic and religious. Our diversity truly unifies us. Our one commonality is that we are brave. In the face of a society that is captured by a movement that is determined to erase us as a legal class. Biology is intrinsic to every aspect of our life. That is why the Sex Discrimination Act exists. But our society right now is legislating away the reality of biological sex, redefining women to include men, encoding legal fictions into law, and trying to make examples of those who refuse to concede. This is a collision of rights. It is between the right of biological females to be recognised as a distinct sex class in law and policy, and those of biological males who want to identify into that sex class. And the extent to which they conflict, sex must have primacy.
Yes.
Because the moment we abrogate sex rights in favour of gender identity rights, then we deny the basis of human existence. We must be able to talk about this. So I am now going to introduce these women who have been brave enough to speak. So the first speaker is Sal Grover, CEO and founder of the Giggle for Girls app. This is an online social media space that she created for females. She's currently defending herself in litigation in the Federal Court of Australia. And this is against a natal male who is alleging discrimination on the basis of gender identity because he was removed from the app. So please welcome Sal Grover.
Thank you so much. So I created a social network for women, but I've spent the past 3.5 years talking about men who say they're women. I want to preface everything I'm about to say with this. I don't believe in gender identity ideology, and I've spent 3.5 years researching it from every angle. I've listened to everything. I believe self-ID laws where a man can self-identify as a woman are authoritarian. No government can dictate what the self thinks, so anyone can identify however they want. These laws dictate what other people are supposed to think, see, and say. Additionally, I don't think men who have had hormones or the surgery are women. Women are not men minus an appendage.
Exactly.
Today, I want to talk about female-only spaces, which, in case it isn't obvious, by definition, don't include men. My mum and I got the idea for Giggle because we wanted women from all over the world to have access to a women-only support network in the palm of their hand. It was a very normal startup process at the beginning: development, investment round, build the product, prepare for launch. I always knew there would be some pushback. I've been a woman long enough to know that anything we do is criticized, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened. I'd never heard the word TERF before February 7, 2020. I'd never been called transphobic or a bigot in my life, but suddenly I was hounded. Thousands of trans activists inundated the App Store and Google Play with 1-star and abusive reviews on an app they had never used. Everything about the company and my life changed. Media called me a transphobe, but wouldn't speak to me. Companies would not work with me based on the trans issue. It has to be noted that females who believe in gender ideology and have a gender identity have always been welcome on the app. Trans men, non-binary females, as they are biologically female, they are welcome. We don't police thought. But no one ever speaks about that, and it's clear the abuse was never about the trans issue. It's about the male issue. The fact that males are not welcome in this female space, that it is successfully policed, that I don't believe men or women under any circumstance, and I'm not afraid to say it. In January 2022, I received an Australian Human Rights Commission complaint for gender identity discrimination. To resolve it, the applicant said he wanted me to attend sex and gender education and allow all men who claim to be women on the app. Basically, just take away my critical thinking, my freedom of belief, and dictate how a woman will run her company for women. This is misogyny on steroids, or, as it were, hormones. The AHRC complaint was not resolved, and I'm currently being taken to federal court in what is the most ridiculous court case name of all time for a very serious issue, Tickle v. Giggle. I'm being taken to court by a person who claims to be a woman, but who has been a man for longer than I've been alive. By someone who repeatedly posts evidence that he is watching my online activity from behind a block. By the only person who has ever called and texted my phone to try and gain access to the app. A person who has scared me. This person is showing everyone exactly why female-only spaces need to exist. Every day of this feels like psychological torture, made to feel like I have done something wrong, illegal, by simply acknowledging reality. Will the Federal Court of Australia say that women cannot have boundaries away from males? Will we be told that we have to ignore all of our instincts? Will we be told that we have to believe in an ideology we reject? Do I have rights? Does any woman in Australia have rights? The Sex Discrimination Act was amended to include gender identity, but this is nonsense. Sex and gender identity are in conflict by definition. Gender identity is in the wrong place, just like a man in a female-only space. And yet the solution is so simple. Unisex spaces. Create as many unisex spaces as you want. Brand them as women plus trans women spaces, gender neutral, whatever. I don't care. I won't stop them, just as I don't stop the countless trans-only apps, spaces, and services that exist. I just want female-only spaces, services, and sport to be available for the women and girls who want and need them. Does this make me a bigot? No. It makes me a woman who cares about women's rights, rights which, by definition, have never included men.
Yeah, well said.
That's something that I think is really important, is that it's not about excluding the trans people. It's about that we need also women only spaces where women still have women only spaces. They can create other spaces where other people of different, backgrounds, identification can also meet as well. I feel like that's really an important thing, is that this isn't about excluding people. This is about having women's spaces as well. And we deserve that. We fought for that. We haven't had our full rights for even very long. So that's important. All right, I'm going to mute me again and play.
Thank you, Sal. So the next woman to speak is Louise Elliott. Louise is a Hobart City Councillor, and she spoke eloquently at the Hobart Let Women Speak rally. And she is now under investigation by Equal Opportunity Tasmania for inciting hate speech and vilification. Please welcome Louise.
Thank you, everyone. So as Catherine said, my name is Louise Elliott and I'm a councillor with the Hobart City Council, but I'm here speaking in my personal capacity. It's important I make that disclaimer, as most of my council disagree with what I'll say today. For example, on Monday night this week, the Hobart City Council voted against the statement that women must be able to speak respectfully and constructively on issues of sex and gender without threats and intimidation. They voted against that. It lost 6-5 with one councillor leaving the room. That wasn't a once-off. Back in February, the majority of the Hobart City Council also voted against, acknowledging that all community members should feel free to feel safe and comfortable using council's change rooms and showers. They voted against all communities should feel safe. Wow. This is the context I'm coming from. Yeah. I was elected to the Hobart City Council late last year, so what I'm witnessing what I thought were universally accepted concepts fail. For me, this is a first. I've been experiencing a lot of firsts lately, whether it's being called a bigot, a TERF, a clown by my male colleague for daring to speak up in women's spaces. I've also found myself trapped with 30-odd local Hobart women surrounded by an aggressive and volatile mob as we tried to hold a Let Women Speak event. I've seen Tasmanian state politicians join in with the mob and encourage them. They screamed in our faces and spat on us. I found myself now also being investigated by the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Commissioner for inciting hatred for stating facts. So, how have I found myself here? When it comes to sex and gender identity, it was sport that first caught my attention, as it's so blatantly, obviously unfair and dangerous to have men competing in women's categories. I've always enjoyed playing netball at the social level, where we have beers after and often before the game too. It was social, but we played to win. I used to play both women's sport, women's netball and mixed netball. I had to give the mixed netball away when I lost a kidney due to cancer, and my remaining kidney is too precious to put in the firing line. I know how different women's and mixed netball is. The women's game is far bitchier, but when there are men on the court, it's rougher, faster, harder. There's more contact, more white line fever. There's more testosterone. It's more dangerous. It's more dangerous because men and women are fundamentally different. From here, I began to see things that I never thought would happen because of their obvious irrationality. They were not only happening, but they were growing in momentum. There's an expectation that you'll accept it no matter how absurd. For example, the craziness of placing male sex offenders in women's prisons and shelters and men declaring that they can breastfeed. and most recently describing women as non-men. It wasn't that long ago that I thought that most people were like me, happy to call people by whatever name they chose, beastly careless about how people presented themselves, and I was also stretching to use people's preferred pronouns even though they weren't reconciling in my head. I thought that while we were doing this because there was no harm done, that we as a society still had a firm grip on reality. I didn't realise that commonly accepted facts and truths had been thrown out the window. Facts like it being impossible for humans to change sex, and that men and women are physically very different, and that the vast majority of sexual-related offences and violence is caused by men, and that men, sadly, present an inherent danger to women, and the fact that trans women remain biological men. And it's that fact that's landed me accused of inciting hatred and under investigation by the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner of Tasmania. Thankfully, I'm not facing this insanity alone, and I have the resolve to stand up to such utter ridiculousness. In all of this, it's women who are losing out. It's women who are losing their sports, their spaces, their language, their existence. It's women who are being attacked and threatened and intimidated for not accepting it. But now it's even bigger than that. This is about freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of expression. It's about not denying proven facts. It's about living in a world where facts are not hate. Yeah. I do not believe that saying that trans women are trans women and remain biologically men is in any way extreme, let alone illegal. It is an extreme to believe that women deserve and need their single-sex sport, spaces and language. I won't be forced to tell lies, and I won't be forced to quietly comply. I certainly won't be recoiling and offering any fake apologies. Women's hard-earned rights, freedom of expression, and the need for us to be able to discuss important issues is far too critical. Exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
So all of these women have been faced with lawsuits, with persecution within their communities for even saying these basic truths. That's the problem that we're having, and this is happening in the U.S. This is happening in Australia, for example. Here, it's happening over in the U.K. I've heard from women all over that this is happening. Like I have firsthand accounts of it, and women, you know, that have told me that this is what's happening.
How dare you claim there are more than, you know, or less than 1,700 different genders?
Okay, no.
I forgot how many there were. I froze for a second there. I was like, is it 17? Is it?
It's 117. I think last we knew. That's the gender ideology. How many genders there are?
Said there was 160, and then I disagreed.
Oh, okay. Yepex said I just called out RBN, Hardlands, and DD, etc. for having no spine to talk about these things. Yeah, like this shouldn't be something that's controversial.
It shouldn't be so fringe that when
this shouldn't be like considered right wing talking point. Like it's not. It's absolutely ridiculous. This isn't a political thing. This is about women's rights.
It's about simple fucking biology.
And biology and the truth. And, you know, I respect and care for people, but this shouldn't be controversial to let women speak, to let women have their women's only spaces. That shouldn't be. All right, I'm gonna go back in to play this. I thought that there were so many good things that these women were speaking of.
Thank you, Louise.
So the next woman we welcome is Kira Lee Smith. She is the spokeswoman for Binary Australia, an organisation that advocates and lobbies for protections against radical gender ideology. After spearheading a campaign against males participating in female soccer competitions, 2 of these males had brought AVOs against her, as well as an allegation of vilification. But I'm pleased to say Kira Lee will be fighting this. So welcome, Kira Lee.
How absurd that we even have to be here today to hold an event about the importance of biological sex. And how absurd that the women you will hear from today, and we've already heard from 2 outstanding, or 3 with Catherine, women, that all of us are being penalised in some way for speaking truth and facts. How absurd that we have, some young people get up and scream obscenities and, I couldn't even understand what they were saying actually. And I know, many of us have been at Let Women Speak events and other places where we're being yelled and screamed at, abused, because we say that females deserve single-sex spaces. That is not controversial. That is not extreme. That is not hate. Now, I'm not allowed to share why the police came to my home and issued me with 2 applications for apprehended violence orders. I can't share the details about identifying males playing in female sporting divisions in this state and around the country. I am being penalised for defending the reality and nature of biological sex in sport. We all know no one can change sex. Men cannot be women. Women cannot become men. No one can change their DNA, their chromosomes, their reproductive system, their pelvic bone shape, their skeletal frame, countless other things determine the differences. Right. And there's a longer list than that. There's thousands, hundreds of thousands of differences between males and females that cannot be changed by dressing up, drugging up, or putting on a frock or chopping bits off. It just can't happen. But the law in this country now errs clearly on the side of calling this hate speech, incitement to violence, for stating biological facts. Feelings, especially the feelings of some men, seem to be more protected than our sex-based rights as females. Some politicians, the media, the police, and trans activists insist that we, especially women, endorse the lie, and it is a lie, that men can now be women. They insist on having access to female-only spaces and services because of their feelings, completely disregarding our feelings in the process, and why these female-only spaces and services were established in the first place. I will not lie. Truth matters too much. Regardless of how captured anyone else is, I will not bow down on that altar of lies. And I'm so proud to stand with these women who say the same thing, and many of you in this room who also feel the same way. There is not one police officer in this country, not one judge, not one politician, not one journalist or one medical practitioner that can prove a male has become a female. There's not one. All they can do is appropriate stereotypes or use brute force or intimidate you at your door with police officers and threats and intimidation and try and force us to accept a lie. I will not. I will not lie. I will not buy the lie, and I will not surrender to that lie. And you know what? Lying is unkind. They tell us to be kind. Well, it's unkind to lie. It's not kind to affirm lies. We don't affirm eating disorders, depression, or other issues that people have. Women are being forced to sacrifice their spots on sporting teams, podiums, hand over our prize money to males who feel entitled to our spaces and services. And around the world, we're seeing males take the top spots in athletics, swimming, cycling, soccer, even fishing. Now, no one's saying that these male-bodied athletes can't compete in sport. No one is saying that. No one's trying to exclude them from sport. It's a furphy. It's a big fat lie. It's a part of the narrative that they're trying to sell us, but it's simply not true. These male-bodied athletes can compete according to their biology in male divisions or open divisions or mixed teams or create a trans space, but that's not enough. They want to colonise women's sports and spaces. Peak sporting bodies in Australia threaten to sanction girls and women who oppose their policies. Make no mistake about that. There are current threats to current and past athletes to not speak about this issue. They refuse to listen to the complaints and they only consult trans groups or their friends or allies when it comes to forming these policies in the first place. Right now in Australia, women and girls are suffering because they are being bullied into silence. They're not allowed to talk about sex for fear of losing their jobs, their positions, or their reputations. Penalising me and the other women here today sends a strong message to females in this country. Sit down, be quiet, shut up, or else. There's women in prisons, rape crisis shelters, change rooms, and places of learning that can't speak up and are being forced to accept males in their spaces and are threatened with penalties if they object. Well, I object. I will not be bullied into silence or intimidated with threats. I will stand up, speak out, and fight for the right to defend female-only spaces and services. And I am proud to stand with these women and talk about this today. It's not a left or a right political issue. It's not about our ethnicity, social status, or religious views. This is simply about biology, reality. Sex is binary, male and female, and that's all, folks.
It's crazy to me that I everything I've heard from these ladies, it's just all common sense. Do you think that they're spewing anything here, Steve, that's hateful in any way?
I didn't hear any hate at all or intolerance. All I heard was like, why can't there be more spaces and more discussion? I don't know. I think it's like just fundamentally important that women, actual biological women and trans women, be heard on this issue and figure out the lanes for each other to be in. Because again, we've talked about this a bunch of times. It's just you can't tell the intent of someone who doesn't fit the role model that you see. Like if someone doesn't pass off as being the sex that they you know what I mean?
They identify as,
then there's an issue there. There's like a little trepidation. And if someone's intention is just to go use the bathroom and not be like some freaky pervert flashing their wiener in the friggin' ladies' room, then why? You know what I mean? There shouldn't really be a big issue about it. It's all about the intent of the people. But as far as like men transitioning to be women and then being in sports and stuff like that, that's just like, it's common sense. There should be like a lane for them, for dudes who are now ladies who want to compete against other ladies or other dudes that are now ladies or whatever. Like however you divide it up, it should be equally matched. You know what I mean? You don't have a featherweight fighting a heavyweight. You know what I mean? It's like there should be an equal.
Well, like there's inherent differences in how big, you know what I mean, most men are in comparison to females. Like, what do you talk about? Their physical appearance, how their lung capacity, their wingspan. You know what I mean? Like there are physical differences, and anybody who's worked in healthcare, you know these differences.
Yeah, that's a good point. Devin says, considering how many women I know could benefit from having breast reduction, it's not paid for by insurance.
Yeah,
it's insane that trans women can get them added on.
Yeah,
like that is backwards as hell. Or the same thing for like.
I wanted to have a reduction.
Internal stuff like, you know what I mean, like hysterectomy or whatever. They have like other things that they need done, and they can't get that done. But but somebody who is transitioning has more access to that same.
It's easier for them to get hormone replacement therapy. It's easier for them to have a hysterectomy or these different affirming cares.
The care should be care. It should be contingent upon each person.
It shouldn't be so quick either. I think that the gender affirming care happens too fast. I think that people need to take a step back and they need to have counseling and really, you know what I mean? There needs to be a process to it like there used to be, because it used to be that there was a process. So it's just, everything's on like this, hyper speed force. And yeah. And I think that's a problem, because there are, we also listen to the voices of the detransitioners, the children who are detransitioners and their parents and what they've gone through and all of that. Like, we need to listen and keep exploring this topic. But I'm gonna bring this back and play.
Thank you for that, Kira Lee. So our next speaker is Moira Deeming. She is an independent Liberal politician in the Parliament of Victoria who has used her political platform to advocate for women, children and families, and to highlight the harms of radical gender theory in schools and in society more broadly. She was an organiser of the lawful and peaceful Let Women Speak rally in Melbourne that was gate-crashed by men cosplaying as Nazis and violently protested by anti-women trans activists. Liberal leader John Pesutto ousted her from the party room after claiming she was affiliated with neo-Nazis. So today, Moira has to fulfil her parliamentary duties down in Victoria, but she has very kindly prepared a presentation for us. So if you'll bear with me for one moment, I will just turn it on.
Hello. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you all in person today, as the Victorian Parliament is sitting and I need to be here. On the 18th of March this year, I and perhaps 200 others, mostly middle-aged left-wing women, attended a legal rally on the steps of Parliament House entitled Let Women Speak. Hemming us in on two sides and almost triple our number were the howling, shrieking, chanting counter-protesters. They were mostly male and mostly under 30. Some of them made throat-slitting gestures towards us. Some of them yelled out threats to follow us home and to rape us. Some threw unknown, vile-smelling liquids at us. A tiny contingent of police and their poor horses were the only things holding them back. The atmosphere was so tense. And I'm sure I'm not alone in describing that I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration that day. We were wary of the frenzied mass of men who seemed more and more likely to break through the police lines and attack us. But we were also resolute. We would not be silenced. We would speak, and we would make ourselves heard. And that's what we did. We did speak, and it felt amazing. The speeches that the women gave that day, I'm just in awe of them. Often they'd begin with trembling voices, their papers shaking in their hands, but by the end, they'd be roaring, full of conviction and fury. And it didn't matter to any of us if we weren't from the same political party. It didn't matter if we had different ideas about how to reduce poverty or look after the environment or anything else. Because we all knew that we were building an unstoppable and undividable momentum for our cause, which is a simple yet powerful one. That women and children are real and that they are entitled to be recognised and protected in law. Sadly, women were only allowed to speak on the steps of Parliament in Victoria for less than 2 hours before we were forced to leave for our own safety. 3 or 4 activists had infiltrated our crowd. They grabbed and broke our microphone, they knocked a young woman unconscious, and repeatedly kicked me, an MP, in the legs. We discovered later, thanks to live streams taken that day, that at the very moment that was happening, a dozen or so men in black masks, who the police had apparently allowed to mill around on the other side of Parliament steps, performed a Nazi salute and held up a sign inciting violence. Clearly, they were nothing to do with us at all. But guess who the most powerful people in this state pointed the finger of blame at? Guess who they spent almost all their breath condemning as hateful, extreme, and bigoted? It wasn't the trans activist counter-protesters or those vile Nazis. And they were the only two groups who'd advocated for or actually committed violence that day. No, no, no. It was the women who were blamed. We were blamed for attracting Nazis. That's like men who blame women for making them so angry that they hit them. None of these powerful men published media releases condemning the heinous violence and threats that were directed towards women that day. And nor at any of the other Let Women Speak rallies, I might add. The vilification and the escalating extreme public violence, which is repeatedly being inflicted on women all around the world who refuse to allow the laws which safeguard women and children to be erased. It's a cultural and a political crisis. I myself was told the next day by the leadership of my party that I was going to be expelled from the parliamentary team for refusing to denounce the organisers of the Let Women Speak rally, Kelly J. Keane and Angela Jones, as Nazi sympathisers. I could do that, or, I was told, I could just resign and make it easier on everybody. I said, no, thank you. And I left. Ultimately, I was expelled from my parliamentary team, but I don't think there's anyone that could say that I've made it easy on them. And that's the lesson that ultimately needs to be learned by those in power. We women have absolutely no intention of making it easy on you to destroy our rights. We're not going to let you smear us, and we're not going to let you silence us. Thank you.
So glad you guys are all here with us, exploring this topic and listening to these women. And you know, they are from Australia. This is the Australian. They're at the Australian Parliament, but it's from all different women from all different backgrounds there, as far as I can tell. And I feel like this is really important to be able to have these discussions.
Yeah, these ladies are brave.
Yeah, they are. And they have all been, you know, same thing that's happened to me. You know, the on the public square of Twitter, I've had people come after me for just speaking up in the same way, in the same caring way that these women are. It's not about excluding others, it's about maintaining what we need as women and our spaces that we need as women and our rights as women. All right, I'm going to go back.
Strong words from Moira. Oh. So we're turning now to another woman who's travelled all the way from Melbourne today. Angela Jones is a lifelong women's rights campaigner, a feminist and an old school lefty. She is founder and co-host of Turf Talks, a weekly YouTube program of gender critical news with an Australian focus. Ange was also one of the organisers of the Let Women Speak rally down in Melbourne. And despite her background in the trade unions and as a woman of the Jewish race, she has been vilified as a Nazi sympathiser. So I invite Ange to the lectern. Thank you.
Thank you. As been said, I was one of the organisers of the Melbourne leg of Kelly J. Keane's Let Women Speak tour, which gives everyday women an opportunity to speak about how gender ideology has impacted their lives. Our peaceful event was counter-protested, and women needed riot police and police on horseback to protect us from the hundreds of violent trans rights activists. As a consequence of being involved with that event, I was directly defamed by the Victorian Liberal opposition leader. A ludicrous claim was made that I'm associated with neo-Nazis, and that association was used to justify the expulsion of Moira Deeming from the Liberal Party. The proof consisted of one tweet, admittedly a sloppy one, taken completely out of context and with a vague inference that it was about transgender people. And that inference certainly didn't come from me. The premise for my defamation had already been set by the Victorian Premier, who described our event and its organisers as vile, bigoted and hateful, and said that we shared the views of white supremacists. Now, this could not be further from the truth, as anyone who was at the event or who watched our wonderful speakers on the live stream would know. We had women from culturally diverse backgrounds, many lesbians, gay men, even an internationally renowned feminist was at our event. To call us hateful and bigoted is an outright lie and gaslighting. It is absolutely shocking that the Premier and the mainstream media would misrepresent us in this way. Now, calling someone a Nazi isn't an innocuous act. In our culture, it's an incitement of violence and hatred. Within 24 hours of the event, my social media was under attack with hundreds of messages calling me the scum of the earth, threatening me and telling me to kill myself, including memes of Hitler with a gun to his head with "follow your leader" and "the only good Nazi is a dead Nazi." And they have gone on for months. The campaign to discredit me was led by people who knew the allegations were untrue. The one thing anti-fascist men hate more than fascists is strong women from their own side, asserting boundaries and saying no to them. I was being made an example of, so other left-wing women wouldn't be tempted to join me in publicly opposing gender ideology. It was surreal and distressing to see my name and image associated with neo-Nazis. My Austrian grandmother escaped the Nazis in 1938, and I was raised to stand up to authoritarianism. It was deeply offensive to me as a person of Jewish descent that the horrors that the Nazis inflicted on Jews was diluted by likening women defending their sex-based rights and child safeguarding to Nazis. It would be easy to get disheartened, but I remind myself that none of this is personal. Gender ideology is such a fragile concept that it cannot withstand the slightest scrutiny. The only way it can sustain itself is via no platforming dissenters or demonising them. Neither of those things are acceptable in a free democratic society. I believe if everyday Australians understood what trans rights really meant for women, they would stand beside us. Here's a short abridged list from a woman who used the pseudonym Gallus Mag that explains what trans rights actually means for women. It means removing the legal right of women to assemble without the presence of men, removing the right to organise politically against sex-based oppression, eliminating data collection of sex-based inequalities in areas where females are underrepresented, the removal of sex-based crime statistics, eliminating sports competition for women and girls, losing the right to keep men out of all female public toilets and change rooms, removal of grants, scholarships, board and trustee designations and affirmative programs to encourage women, the right for women to create reproductive clinics, domestic violence services, rape crisis or any other support group specifically for women, eliminating media and public discourse specifically for females, removing the right for journalists to report accurately on the sex and the history of the subjects, eliminating the legal right of lesbians to congregate publicly and lesbian-specific organisation and advocacy groups, removal of the legal right for women to free speech related to sex roles and gender, elimination of the right for women and girls to resist state-enforced sex roles by controlling our appearance, our behaviour and our thoughts, and removal of the rights to have single-sex hospital wards and the right for disabled and dependent women to choose female carers for intimate care, and the removal of the legal right for female prisoners to be confined by the state separate from men. It's hard to believe that protesting the loss of rights that women fought for over centuries is now being considered hateful and bigoted. What is even more sinister is if we don't stand up now, proposed hate speech legislation will make things so much worse for women. The last few months has been surreal and stressful, but some amazing things have also happened. People saw how I and other women were treated and the violence we were being subjected to for simply stating facts, and they became so outraged they decided to join us. I've received hundreds of messages of support and offers of help. We are no longer just a bunch of TERFs, a silenced minority speaking into an echo chamber. We are a genuine bipartisan grassroots political movement, and we have done it without the vast amounts of money or media coverage, and in spite of our opposition's best efforts to silence us. I'm prepared to work with women across the aisle with conservative women to repeal sex self-ID and get women's rights and children's safeguarding back. When women turn up to crisis services, we don't ask them who they vote for. Our door is open to every woman in need. And I believe every woman needs sex-based rights, spaces, roles and sports. And every woman is needed in this fight. The bond that exists between women defies politics. Thank you.
I think that that's so spot on right there. What she says, the bond between women, it defies politics, and I think that that's true. And we need to have each other's back on this. Women need to have other women's back and say, you know what? Yeah.
That lady did have good hair.
Yeah.
I concur. Good hair.
Good hair. Yes. Yeah, and Devin, yeah, it's very true. And he said it makes me mad as hell that people don't understand why sex matters when it comes to healthcare. Absolutely, absolutely. If Steve went to the doctor and said, "Doctor, I can't get pregnant. Something is wrong. I can't get pregnant," the doctor wouldn't look at Steve and think, "Oh, well, let's run some tests and figure out why." Because Steve doesn't have the plumbing. But if I went to the doctor and I was of appropriate age and I was like, doctor, I want to, get pregnant and I couldn't, then the doctor would to run tests because there's things for him to or her to look at. Right? Because a female carries has the organs and everything else. Like our body is made to do that. And so there is a difference. It's not just the clothes we wear. It's not just how our hair looks. It's not it's not whether or not we have the genitalia or not. Like it comes down to like we are so much more than that. It's our DNA, it's our bones, it's our entire body regulatory system.
The doctor said, yeah. All you really need is good love. That's what he would say.
Like we need to come together as women and we need to say like, this is not okay. And we need just, we need some so just common sense thinking. It's not even anything that should be controversial. It shouldn't be a controversial issue that the women need their spaces.
All you need is a little good love.
Yeah, and just like a man is a whole thing. Like there's stuff that men go through that I would never understand, because I'm not a male and I don't, I've never felt like a male and everyone, it's funny, people will be like, "Oh, if you could be a man for 24 hours, what would you do?" Or I have no idea. I have no idea how that feels. I don't really want to. I'm sorry. I like being being a woman. I don't really want to I don't even want to like it's just not something that's in my imagination that I've ever like wanted to like do that. Yeah, exactly, Joe. We've had to fight for everything. Like exactly. And we should be able to speak on this stuff. This shouldn't be controversial. There should be nothing controversial about what's being said. It's not about excluding anybody. It's about maintaining our spaces. We can do that and also be inclusive of other people and say, yes, well, we need to make accommodations for other people as well. But that doesn't mean that we need to erase our spaces. That's the difference. All right.
Thank you, Ange. So the next woman who's up is Jasmine Sussex. She was fired from her volunteer position as a breastfeeding counsellor after nearly 20 years of service because she objected to the word parent instead of mother, human milk instead of mother's milk or breast milk, and chest feeding instead of breastfeeding. She has raised concerns about guidance produced by the Australian Breastfeeding Association for males who want to induce lactation to feed an infant. And for this, and for tweeting about this, and for tweeting about
we covered that on the
some
show.
of the males who want
It's
to
happening.
do this or claim to do this, she has been subjected to government censorship. So I invite Jasmine to the lectern.
Thanks, Kath and John, for having me up here in Gadigal country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land we're meeting on here today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to honour all the mothers who've birthed on this country since time began. 2 years ago, on Mother's Day, a man invaded an online space for breastfeeding mums to boast about his success inducing lactation as a transgender woman. I noticed the man declaring that he had fed his son colostrum and angrily debating the breastfeeding mothers and volunteer counsellors online who told him that this was not biologically possible. I didn't speak to him at the time as I naively believed that the Australian Breastfeeding Association would intervene to protect its volunteers and make it a safe place for us to work. How naive I was. Since then, I've observed that these men, in growing numbers, are waging psychological war on women. And the latest insult is the covetous demand to be affirmed as mothers. The false grievance culture of these men who feel entitled to affirm their gender identities by using their babies is very troubling. And I do wonder what kind of endocrinologist or general practitioner would collude with men like this to sabotage the breastfeeding relationship. Perhaps worst of all is the treachery of a government-funded women's health organisation that in these circumstances would entertain a man like this and his complaint and use it to discipline, vilify and finally expel any volunteer who dared to say no to him. It still surprises me that these men, unethical doctors and breastfeeding charities truly underestimate the strength of women. There is nothing more determined than a mother protecting her child. Unfortunately, this is what happens when unethical doctors allow patients and activists to bully them into an affirmation-only medical model. This is what happens when governments and health departments kneel before the altar of gender identity ideology and pretend not to know what a woman is or a mother. It is so cruel that the Australian Professional Association for Transgender Health is actively seeking to normalise and promote these experimental practices. As medical professionals committed to doing no harm, they need to refocus on helping their patients to accept the boundaries of human biology. Men do not breastfeed. Exactly. And please help us make this stop. Yeah.
As a woman who did breastfeed for 2.5 years, and I was told to go breastfeed in the bathroom at one point, and I had to be always like covered up to think about you know, biological males trying to do that when they are so pumped full of hormones that something is coming through, and I don't know exactly what the baby is getting, but it does not feel right. It really doesn't. And not even every woman is able to breastfeed, so it's like that affirmation of that individual isn't worth the risk of the child, in my opinion. We've covered before that men were trying to breastfeed with the hormones, and yeah, so it's not just happening in the US. Like I said earlier, this is happening in Australia and other cases of things like this happening in the UK. It's happening everywhere, and the numbers are growing, and women's rights are disappearing. Yeah, and like Joe says here, yeah, like and some, and some women have trouble. I thought I was gonna have to stop at the 2-week mark. I was in so much pain that I thought I was gonna have to stop, but then suddenly it was like, I don't know what happened. It was like I made it past the 2 weeks. I was like almost in tears trying to breastfeed, and made it past the first 2 weeks, and then I was able to. It was fine. I don't know what changed, but we got a hang of it right after that 2-week mark. It's not easy for everyone. It's not just like an easy thing where you just know how to instinctively how to breastfeed and get a baby to latch on properly. All right, I'm going to put this back on for us.
Thank you, Jasmine. So our next speaker is Dr. Holly Lawford-Smith. She is an Associate Professor of Political Philosophy at the University of Melbourne. She has actually written a book on this issue, Gender Critical Feminism, published with Oxford University Press. Some time ago, she launched a website called No Conflict, They Said, where she simply wanted to collate the stories of women who had been impacted by gender identity in their lives. For that, she was subjected to a smear campaign by fellow academics, a disciplinary process that was ultimately dismissed, and she was subjected to threats and intimidation on campus. In response, Holly has lodged a formal complaint against the University of Melbourne. Unfortunately, today Holly is overseas, but she has kindly prepared a presentation for us. So bear with me a moment while I just set it up.
I want to use this time to tell you about something that most people don't know about universities, and that is how their disciplinary procedures work. The most important thing I can tell you about these processes is that they are governed by confidentiality requirements. And this is for good reason, because if false or malicious complaints were publicized, that could cause retaliation by others against either the alleged victim or the alleged perpetrator, and it could cause reputational damage to the accused and also to the university. Confidentiality can protect all parties, but confidentiality also gives the university cover to use disciplinary procedures as a way of sanctioning staff without actually imposing formal sanctions like demotion or dismissal. Here's a generic case. A faculty member expresses an opinion on social media. This invites a public backlash, which results in complaints being made to the university. The university decides to investigate those complaints by initiating disciplinary proceedings. It can decide to do this even when it's obvious that the complaint should be dismissed out of hand. These investigations can take months and months to resolve. An individual who decides to protect herself by securing legal representation might incur fees into the tens of thousands. The bureaucracy itself can be surreal and stressful. Endless meetings, delays, auto-replies, refusals to meet, ignored emails, etc. I know of quite a few people by now who have been subject to these procedures, and they all say exactly the same phrase: the process is the punishment. It doesn't matter if you're cleared in the end. You had to go through all that and you couldn't talk about what they were doing to you with anyone except your lawyer if you can afford one, and your support person if you have one. You're having all these worries about your job security and how these proceedings might go, and you can't draw on support from the wider community of people in your position precisely because you're not allowed to talk about what's happening to you. Confidentiality makes sense for interpersonal workplace conflicts, but it doesn't make sense when it's the university against the individual member of faculty on grounds that something that they've said is off message relative to the university's institutional values or branding. Academic freedom is the freedom of faculty to be off message. I've been exceptionally lucky because on the occasions that I've been subject to disciplinary proceedings, the surrounding matters were all so public that I had heaps of support, even if I couldn't talk about exactly what was happening to me. But I want to use this occasion to note that we just don't know how many other academics are being dragged through these processes right now. And for how many of those, that's because they have the wrong views on sex and gender, refusing to prioritize gender identity over sex. We just don't know how many women throughout the universities of Australia, whether that's staff or students or administrators, actually support the gender critical position on the importance of sex and sex-based rights for women, and yet are afraid to say so. It's part of the diversity and inclusion agenda of the contemporary university that employees be empowered to bring our whole selves to work. Well, I say it's time to make sure that gender critical people can bring our whole selves to work too.
All right, so our next speaker is Dr. Gillian Spencer, who's travelled here from Queensland today. She is a senior staff psychiatrist at the Queensland Children's Hospital. She has been stood down from clinical practice due to an accusation of transphobia. Dr. Spencer spoke publicly at the Let Women Speak rally in Canberra on the ubiquitous focus on radical gender theory that is throughout our society and its impact on children. So welcome to Gillian. Thank you.
And thanks so much to Holly for explaining those sort of situations that I have a lot of familiarity with. And the information that Kath has kindly said about me is from the public record and hasn't come from me. Excuse me, after doing 5 years of training in psychiatry, I qualified as a child and adolescent psychiatrist in 2009, and I have no religious or political affiliations. I think it's a really hard situation for child and adolescent psychiatrists at the moment, and for any mental health clinicians who work with children, because there's a lot of organisational and social pressure to affirm children. But when we stop to look at the evidence base behind the affirmation model, we find that the studies have major flaws and they don't show sufficient benefit to outweigh the risks and the harms. The medications used, puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, are being prescribed by doctors off-label so that no drug company has had to prove to the regulators that these treatments provide benefits that outweigh the risks and the harms. I would say that the vast majority of child and adolescent psychiatrists hold very serious concerns about the affirmation model, but to speak up in the current climate, or even to take a more cautious clinical approach, puts their employment at risk, their APRA registration is at risk, and they fear criminal sanctions under the conversion therapy laws in some states. I think it is only a very small group of doctors who believe in the affirmation model, but they are supported by a very vocal social movement. Gender medicine has taken child and adolescent psychiatrists by surprise and has put us on the back foot. Previously, our discipline always took a developmental approach, which means that the years of childhood and adolescence were understood to be a period of incredible growth and change. We didn't label children with long-term conditions, such as personality disorders, because we knew that a lot of conditions would ease with maturity. And indeed, the 11 studies that were conducted before the affirmation model was in use, when they used a watchful waiting approach, found that 60 to 90% of children with gender dysphoria became comfortable in their own bodies with maturity. I assure you that this is not part of a culture war. This is a really serious child protection issue. We entered our field to try to assist children to thrive, but the gender clinics have been set up and psychiatrists are being forced to affirm the social transition of all children and go along with the idea that puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones will lead to benefit. We are not being allowed any professional discretion as to whether that is the right approach. It is incredibly distressing to be forced into harming other people's children or otherwise face potential loss of one's career, livelihood, or to be cast out of the workplace, as has happened to me. But this is too important, so I will not be silenced, and I wish to call for an urgent federal inquiry into the model of care for the treatment of children with gender dysphoria.
Yes. Thank you, Dr.
Again, this shouldn't be controversial. This should not be controversial. It really shouldn't be. I think if people are saying that, this is something that's concerning, then why is it that there isn't more conversation about things? Why is it that people are silenced on this? That shouldn't be the case. If there's nothing, you know what I mean? Like you speak what you speak with confidence, and you should be able to speak these things. There's nothing that these ladies are saying that is hurtful. I don't understand why women who do say these things are called TERFs and homophobic, transphobic. We're called bigots. We're called all of these things. Called right wingers. They're right winger views. All of these things are said and have been said to me. It's insane to me. We need more support, and we need to be speaking up against this. We need to. I feel like people are coming around to it now because more people are speaking up about it. And we've been discussing this kind of thing on this channel since the very beginning. We talked about matriarchy versus patriarchy, and Lady Alex has been on. We've talked about gender roles and stereotypes and all of these things. We've been talking about this all along. This isn't a new topic for us, but the intensity in which this is happening, it's escalating. All right, I'm going to mute me and play more of this.
Dr. Spencer. So today we invited every MP in the New South Wales Parliament. We had a number who kindly accepted our invitation to attend. We had quite a number who ignored us, and we had some who declined. One of those was Alex Greenwich, member for Sydney, who today chose to announce on the ABC that he will be tabling his equality bill later this year. Now, this bill will cover off sex self-ID. So this will enable any man to go into the registry, and with a small fee and a form, he will be able to change his sex marker on his birth certificate. It will also cover what they refer to as conversion therapy. This will mean that anyone who seeks to medically transition a child will now be protected by law. And thirdly, we anticipate that it will fortify the hate speech and vilification laws. So as we've seen with these women, they are already being weaponised against those who want to speak up. So with Alex Greenwich's bill, we all need to join together, be united in pushing back against it. So to the MPs who have joined us here today, I would like to invite any of them up here if they would like to share a couple of words about what they think about this issue. Would anyone like to come up to the lectern? Greg Donnelly from Labor.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to New South Wales Parliament House. Catherine's just made an impossible demand on me, and it is, you've got 2 minutes. I think most of you know that parliamentarians of whatever persuasion talk under wet cement for as long as required. But can I commence by welcoming you all? Can I particularly thank my colleague, the Honourable John Relic, for the role that he's played in helping to organise today. That's almost 2 minutes, Catherine. And can I say to him, as I said to him privately but publicly, I am more than happy to be publicly associated with this and to be recognised as a co-convener, although properly to recognise the principal work done by John and these wonderful women to bring this together. My name's Greg Donnelly. I'm a New South Wales member of Legislative Council. This is a very sort of quick, abbreviated coverage. I've been here for a little while, hence the greyish beard. I spent about almost 19 years working for a trade union, very proudly from a Labor background. Came to the Parliament with great fortune and luck and I guess getting a break, I suppose, in 2005. And I've been here over that period of time. I'm proudly a member of the Labor Party. But I have to say, I am, dare I say, a little bit disappointed that more of my Labor Party colleagues, for whatever reason, wouldn't join me. Most importantly, John, the convener, principal convener, and the women who've joined us today. Perhaps over time it'll become clear why that is the case. I can't speak for them. It's not that they didn't know it was on, but obviously made a conscious decision not to attend. There's always reasons not to attend, and politicians have always got an answer why they can't be somewhere. And sometimes those sort of lines sometimes work. But I think on today's occasion, I don't think anyone quite believes there's so many meetings on at the same time that people can't in great numbers attend. I might say not just from the Labor Party, but there's no representatives, I think, here from the Greens or the Animal Justice Party. I can go for a few other parties, but I welcome to see a number of my parliamentary colleagues, and I won't name you all, but from the Liberal Party, from the One Nation, Kenny Mahalik, members from both houses, and any other who I can't see might be standing in the back. But can I just say, don't think for a moment that those who are here today only represent those who are interested and concerned about the matters covered. They're of profound significance, which I'll touch on in a moment. But can I just say to you, you might find this surprising, but it's true, that the reason why a number of politicians of all political persuasions are not here today and being seen to be associated with you is that they're nervous and they're frightened. And dare I say, some of them intimidated. So the same strategies that's been used and deployed, so I use the word advisedly, quite viciously, to try and shut you women up, please go away, is being done with respect to members of Parliament, not just in this legislature, but all around Australia in the 6 states, 2 territories and the Commonwealth Parliament. And I think thus far, at least, that's been a pretty successful strategy that we can spend a lot of time talking about how I think we need to flip over, because in addressing a number of these issues, that really involve the engagement with politicians, and there's no doubt about that. Just for interest, I just had a look at who was the first female member of the Labor Party who entered the New South Wales Legislative Council. This is just a bit of fun fact for those who enjoy fun fact. The Legislative Council that I come from, which is the room over there, I'm happy to show you after the meeting, it was first convened in 1824. So that's the first legislature in the colony of New South Wales. It's the oldest legislature in Australia and one of the longest unbroken continuous legislatures in the world. That was 1824. The first woman, so it goes without saying that up to this point they're all men, biological men. The first woman in New South Wales Legislative Council who was a member of the Labor Party was Catherine Elizabeth Green. She was proudly a member of the Labor Party. Now, as was the case, she was appointed, because back at that time there were appointments to the council, not election. She was appointed on the 24th of November, 1931. So there's no women in the Legislative Council where I'm from 24 to the 24th of November 1931, and was appointed by the then Premier, a very interesting and polarising character, the Honourable Jack Lang, that some may have heard of. So if you sort of think about it, just quickly, and you've graced this, that effectively women were hitherto, before that date, in the New South Wales Council, invisible. There was none there. And I hazard a doubt, to a degree, unwelcome. I mean, blokes, like to be blokes and, like to sort of hold things tight, and when you've got a good thing going, keep it going. But of course, most appropriately, as necessary, things broke down. We became more enlightened. And we can look back with some almost extraordinary fascination about how this was so. But I'm just reciting to you what history is. But invisible and unwelcome. And I have to say, looking at some of the behaviour at the start of the meeting by some of the people who decided to come along, it sort of made me think immediately, has much changed since then? It's quite extraordinary when you think about it. That in the oldest parliament in Australia, one of the oldest continuous operating parliaments in the world, there could be an open, overt, deliberate attempt to disrupt. And I guess from the point of view of those who participated, to actually stop it continuing. Now, obviously, it was a bit of a stunt, and we accept that in politics. We've been around. It's unpleasant. Can I just say, I think the way it was managed was very, very well. I'd like to thank everyone for the way in which they, I think, dealt with it very, very sensitively and appropriately. Can I say, sorry, it's bloody what? It's falling off. Can I say that in 2023, I find it, and I use this word, somewhat numbing to have been here for the last hour and a bit, listening to what I did. I've observed this all going on now for a period of time. I have to say my particular area of focus, and I welcome the doctor, has been with respect to the area of the deep concerns, deep medical and scientific concerns about the way in which children and adolescents who may be or are gender dysphoric are being treated medically and health-wise in Australia. It's a whole separate discussion, but that's been my area of particular focus. And to think that we have various different elements of activism, representation, concern, that the attempt to essentially throw a blanket over all of it and stop it being discussed in a liberal democracy is quite extraordinary. And I'm not one to sort of exaggerate things and beat things up, although politicians are accused of that. But can I say it is quite alarming and to a degree frightening? Not so much the bit of colour and motion and action at the start was sort of predictable, but it's quite frightening to actually see the extent to which the women who presented today have demonstrated, through no exaggeration of what their experiences were, what has happened to them. And I won't go through all of what they covered off on, but we've had a cultural principle in this country of respecting freedom of thought and speech and the notion of a fair go all round. Now, that's something deeply ingrained in Australians, even though perhaps it's arguable that might be waning a little bit for various sort of ideological and political reasons. But the fair go around is something which we just assume in Australia is the way we deal with each other. And if we don't agree with each other, fair enough, I'll have another beer. If you know what I mean, another wine. That's sort of the way which expect people to behave. Respect each other, know that we're all different. We all have our own person, our own opinions, all the rest of it. But that's just part of the way we are. And we're a wonderful country in many respects in terms of our multiculturalism. We've got people from all parts of the world coming together, living together, in a way where there's respect and decency and people getting on. But to just reflect for a moment on what we've seen from the speakers, or heard from the speakers this afternoon, I just find quite chilling and not just offensive, but disquieting. And I have to say that's probably a big call for me because I sort of say this, but I'm from the New South Wales Labor Party, from the right wing of the New South Wales Labor Party, which is not known for its delicacy in treating people, and people in New South Wales might understand that. There's a way in which we get things done, and it's not always pretty. Nothing like what I say has been covered off today. But you know what I mean? This is sort of quite chilling and disconcerting to see. I just want to collectively thank the speakers today. And I know there's other people there. There's Rachel Wong, who's done wonderful work from Women's Forum Australia, and others as well that I can't see or not able to name. The collective work you're doing has been, is, and continues to be extraordinary. And all I can say is it is very hard to place a level of thanks and gratitude to yourselves for what you're doing, because you are standing up to something which in fact is quite, in its essence, quite authoritarian and totalitarian. And I don't mean those words to simply inflate this or to blow it up or to exaggerate it. It's quite authoritarian and totalitarian. And we've seen how that's played out in cultures.
To his point there, that's why I call it rainbow fascism. Because people are shoving a certain narrative down everybody's throat. And if you don't agree, they are coming at you. They are trying to cancel you. They try to do it to other people. I mean, J.K. Rowling's been going through that for years. For speaking about truth in biology. Like, I don't think that they're saying anything here that is hateful in any way. It's true. But the way that they come at you, it's like they are completely fascist in their actions. There is no conversation. They start calling you names. They pile on you, and it's just like I won't stop, and I'm not going to be silenced for speaking the truth. I don't have it in me to not speak the truth. I still respect people and their preferred pronouns. I'm not against anybody, but we do need to maintain the rights that the little ones that we do have as women, the ones that we have fought for. We do need to maintain these, and we cannot let people just come in and start telling us that we don't matter.
We only have to look at the last century to see how the dreadful human misery and worse associated with that way in which people interact in societies, if it ever comes to pass. So there's a sense of being duty-bound to resist and oppose that. And I think we all have to do that in our own ways. Obviously, women have a particularly unique and important role in all of this because of the stakes for them. But I do invite my male colleagues in this parliament and all around Australia to understand we have to stand side by side, arm by arm, and work with you to push back and insist that this is not acceptable, and you will not treat people this way. You will not treat women in particular this way, because that's not the way in which political discourse, discussion, and debate over what can be a delicate matter, a challenging matter, is conducted in this country. Gone well over the 2 minutes, so I'll just jump towards the end. We're just sort of warming up here, but I won't press my luck. Can I just say, a part of my comment about it being quite chilled and made feel quite uneasy about the threats of the not just the overt intimidation, but the personal threats to body, and to make the point, and not only actual, but also even just potential, but actual assault, that they are criminal activities. There are criminal codes in this country, and some of the actions and behaviours that have been perpetrated against these women, others, actually is criminal activity, and probably would be found to be so if charges were laid by the police and the matter prosecuted before a court and properly dealt with. And I find it quite disconcerting that some of the behaviour has not been captured in that way and dealt with as it should be, because my sense would be that a properly constituted court hearing the evidence would make those conclusions. I'll just conclude on these last couple of points that I don't think that anything that's been put today by the women who've spoken can be construed in any way as hateful, transphobic, or these range of other allegations, sledges, however you like to describe them, being perpetrated by these individuals. It's just not the case at all. Just not the case at all. And the media here, I don't know whether the ABC is still here, but I do welcome the ABC here, and I genuinely invite the ABC to be balanced in the coverage of this report for this day. It's very easy to take the first 20 seconds of rah-rah and make that the feature of today, but I invite you to look at the people who are going to do the editing of the tapes and the story tonight, to reflect deeply and seriously on what these women have said, because these women are very much at the pointy end, but can I assure you that below that, there is an absolute massive level of support, which hitherto has not been revealed and is not probably yet animated and activated. But what the message is today, and I think this is what I'd like to get people to take away, is that it is sort of opening up. It's broken open, and it's a bit like the dam being broken open. It will flow in a significant way, and there will be a reckoning taking place. And I don't mean reckoning in any sort of unsatisfactory way, any unfair way. I'm not suggesting any behaviour which is unreasonable, but there's got to be a reckoning of what's been going on and what we've heard today, and what is something we consider as fair and decent and reasonable behaviour in the country that we all love and want to continue our children and our children's children to be able to live in. Finally, can I just conclude with the words organise, organise, organise. That's Politics 101. Wonderful work has been done. I'm sure a number of politicians in this state and the other states and territories will be open to discuss that further. I think not only do we have to accept that we need to do this, but we must do this, and we actually have a duty of care to you all and what you're trying to do, and to resist. So organise, 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 resist, resist, resist. Quite frankly, there actually is no choice. Absolutely, there is no choice. I'm sure we all wish we weren't even having today's event. I think someone said that. I too hold that view, but you can't stand by and allow this to continue. And it's incumbent on all of us to stand up, to provide the support. And can I just say, some of this is going to cost money, and is costing money. So the matters of financial support, I'm sure people would be welcome to talk to the ladies, or the women ladies. Be careful, they'll get hit about the head in the house if I use the word ladies. That these women actually are given the material support, the spiritual support and the psychological support to keep this very tough fight going, and to stand with them for as long as it takes to ultimately prevail and bring about a proper and decent understanding of the issues that we've been looking at this afternoon. Thank you very much. That's a politician's 2 minutes. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Greg. So I would like to conclude by saying thank you everyone for joining us here today. I look around the room and I see that there is diverse political views, diverse life experience, both sexes, and people of all different faiths and life experiences. So thank you for having the courage, the conviction and the curiosity to join us here today. So let's hope that this is the first of many brave spaces on this issue. Thank you. So that really concludes the formalities. So if anyone, I beg your pardon. Oh, Tanya, would you like to speak?
Sorry, just to very quickly.
Oh, no, absolutely. Please join us.
So I'm going to come up very quickly, okay? I'm Tanya Mihalik. I'm One Nation. I was the Labor Party, but I quit last year. Credit to Greg Donnelly because he's a fantastic person and a true person of faith, but also a person who has terrific values. So well done, Greg. And well done to John Ryder on organising today. I want to mention Tanya Davies, and we've done a lot of work together here in the Parliament, but Tanya's Liberal Party, so she also wants to say a couple of words. But I just want to congratulate all of the women. You're just fantastic. You're courageous, you have conviction and character, and I'm delighted to have been part of this amazing event. And thank you for your courage and just your wonderful words. And, it's just we're in awe, really, aren't we? Because I think it's people like yourselves that should be here in Parliament. We need more women like yourselves in Parliament. So please become even more active. I'd love to see ladies like yourselves, and we can say the word ladies, can't we? Let's not be afraid of the word ladies. I'd love to see more ladies like yourselves in Parliament. So thank you so much for what you have said today. It's just so encouraging. It really is what we need right now. Common sense, hey? Common sense. So thank you, and I'll hand over to Tanya Davies.
Thank you. Look, I don't want to take up too much more time, but I certainly didn't want to let the opportunity pass by without having someone from the Liberal Party stand up and actually make a contribution to this extremely vital and significant discussion. It's correct in what someone said earlier, but I can't believe that we're having to have this conversation and fight for these rights that it seemed like 100 years ago we suddenly got all of these rights and began to get equality with our fellow men on this earth, and then all of a sudden in the blink of an eye they're being stripped away and stolen from us. Can I also just acknowledge that we have Robert here from the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. He did arrive a little bit later on, so thank you for coming. And I think that covers pretty much all the representation in the room from political parties. But I just want to say publicly how deeply I admire and respect the women who have spoken in the room and on the video presentations this afternoon. You, I do believe, have way more courage than even myself. And I'm deeply humbled by how strong you are, how much conviction you have about the cause. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to see you, meet you, and join with you in this vital, vital cause that we must win for the sake of women now and for the sake of our girls who are at school and primary school and the little girls that are yet to be born here on this earth. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I also want to reiterate the words of my wonderful friend from the upper house, the other side of politics, but we are aligned in many of our core values and principles, and that is that we need the men to join with us and to stand with us and to support us, to be our mentors, our sponsors, to be our cheerleaders. Just don't wear the skirts. To call other men into this fight, because at the end of the day, it's your wives, it's your mothers, it's your daughters, it's your nieces that are at stake. And so we need everyone to come on board. And it's not about destroying or criticising or putting down anyone who chooses to live a particular lifestyle. It's about respecting who we are, what our genetics are, how we are designed. We are designed to be different, and we celebrate that difference, and we need that protected. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here. I look forward to continue to working with you.
So that was the Let Women Speak and why can't women talk about sex aspect of the show. That was that portion. I'm gonna make sure that if you guys want, I can put it. We can put the links down in the description, so that you can also go and see that if you would want to separately. I'll put it in the YouTube chat right now, and then we'll put it in the show notes afterwards. But I watched that and I thought it was so important to bring up, because it's not just something that's happening in the US. It's something that is a growing issue that other places are starting to address. And, women are being silenced. And, and I can't stand by and watch our rights just get taken away. I can't.
Gotta say something.
And they were in Australia, so that was different. Some of their, the way that they talked about things and all their different political parties, like man, I'm like, I'm kind of jealous. Like, think about, they have all those political parties, not just like two major ones, and then you have like a third party that's it. I mean, I don't know how their elections are, but maybe. So there was another article that I wanted to also bring up and discuss, and I'm going to share that. There we are. And this is called They Are Scared. It's gender activists no longer have total control over the narrative, and they know it. So this is Riley's Last Stand. It's a reader-supported publication, and you can sign up to help support them if you would like. So this goes into right here. On May 5th and 6th, 2023, I attended a training conference organized by the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, CAMFT. My aim was to gain an in-person perspective on the unfolding developments within the profession, particularly concerning gender ideology. I was eager to witness the current discourses imparted to my colleagues firsthand. Some striking revelations emerged from these sessions, some of which I will share, which primarily focusing on why I am convinced that gender activists feel their narrative is under threat. Oh, what's happening? Oh, okay. In one of the sessions, Linda K. Reeves, a WPATH GE certified gender specialist, openly voiced her concerns, saying she was afraid of the new bills being passed in the Republican states, labeling them as anti-trans. The bills she's referred to are designed to protect minors from irreversible medical interventions before they before they're capable of informed consent. Reeves' statement of fear was expressed twice during her 90-minute lecture, indicating the perception of losing legislative ground amid previous progress made by the trans community. And in another intriguing move, the workshop Gender Affirming Medical and Mental Health Care of Transgender Adolescents, hosted by Aidan Olson Kennedy, LCSW, and Joanna Olson Kennedy, MD, requested that no filming take place due to the the hostile environment. Aiden, a fully transitioned trans man, and Joanna, a Los Angeles Children's Hospital pediatrician with 16 years of experience prescribing puberty blockers, were the sole workshop to issue such a request. This class taught me that puberty blockers are as harmless as a new haircut or clothing style. My question for them is, if you're an expert sharing information, clinical information that you are certain of, why would you want your workshop to be hidden? The workshop attempted, albeit clumsily, to debunk various gender critical perspectives, signifying that opposing narratives are reaching their audience. For instance, the common question of the child's self-awareness at a young age was addressed. Both Aiden and Johanna asserted that children as young as 3 know their identities. That's wow. They countered the prevalent concern about the internet's influence on young people, stating that more time online is actually a good thing and indicates a healthy journey of self-discovery. Johanna advocated the transitioning of children, since every trans adult was once a child, conveniently admitting that the majority of children with gender dysphoria, when not affirmed, ultimately desist. According to the summary of multiple studies, about 80% of children desist. So 80% of children don't. The puberty relieves that gender dysphoria for the children that do have it, or that feeling, that awkward feeling going through puberty. It is a natural thing for them to go through. I don't know why that's controversial either to say, but it is. According to a summary of multiple studies, evidence from 10 available prospective follow-up studies from childhood to adolescence indicates that childhood gender dysphoria will recede within puberty in 80% of cases. A Dutch paper notes that follow-up studies show the persistent rate of gender identity disorder to be about 15.8 or 39% out of the 246 children who were reported in the literature. During the workshop, the Olsen Kennedys emphasized that gender dysphoria often cause other comorbid mental health issues, contradicting what many therapists observe distressed children clinging to trans identity with the misguided belief that it will resolve their underlying issues. Depression treatment does not treat dysphoria. Gender dysphoria for some folks is depression. Gender dysphoria equals depression, stated Aiden Olsen Kennedy. Unexpectedly, the instructors discredited the standard psychology manual, the Diagnostic Standard Manual, the DSM-5, which states a person must experience gender dysphoria for at least 6 months. Aiden described the DSM as a book smothered in cis white privilege. Wow. Aiden stated the DSM was colonized due to a problematic binary language and its emphasis on gender dysphoria as a distress. Well, if it's not a distress, then why are they doing something about it? Feeling that way. That doesn't make any sense to me. However, Aiden spent much of the lecture, including a video showing the audience how distressing being trans is. Aiden even said it is normal for dysphoric feelings to increase after receiving hormones and surgeries. And in fact, there are pieces of dysphoria you can't undo, negating the prevailing narrative that transition emulates distress. Nevertheless, the audience was assured that offering puberty blockers, hormones, and surgeries is a compassionate form of treatment. And Aiden rhetorically asked the audience, at what point is it mean to let people suffer? Finally, Olsen Kennedys acknowledged the existence of detransitioners, a group often overlooked due to their narrative challenging the notion that those who claim to be trans always know. The instructors downplayed the numbers of detransitioners, but couldn't entirely ignore their existence given their compelling stories increasingly being shared by individuals like Chloe Cole, Richie Heron, and many others who fell victim to gender affirming care. People are going to detransition, that's okay, but we need to not to organize our practice around it, she said. Shockingly, Olson Kennedy also dismissed concerns about the excessive prescription of puberty blockers, arguing that legislation around their use is unnecessarily given and only 5,000 children total are on puberty blockers in the US. That a small amount of kids will be writing legislation about. However, most people would and should agree that 5,000 healthy children being medicalized for life is 5,000 too many. She also argued that puberty blockers are very helpful because they prevent future surgeries. Yet she failed to highlight potential side effects like the inability to achieve a sexual orgasm later in life for those initiating puberty blockers before Tanner stage 2, which is 9 to 11, or the FDA's warnings about brain swelling and blindness. I mean, there's a lot of other things like there's osteoporosis, and I've started to look into some of these into the Lupron, and it's there's a lot of side effects. Another astonishing argument came when the detrimental effects of cross-sex hormones were downplayed, with the simplistic reasoning being that everyone has hormones. Yes, that was the argument from the credentialed medical professional. Nonetheless, a few side effects were mentioned, but many serious ones like early onset menopause, urinary tract issues, mood instability, blood clots, heart issues were omitted. At least the patient is alive, she stated, alluding to the high suicide rates of trans people, but she did not share any data on the point. Lastly, Lisa Reeves addressed Lisa Lippman's research on rapid onset gender dysphoria, ROGD, in her presentation, claiming it had been debunked by WPATH due to its reliance on parental observations, and it was dismissed based on the assumption that parents possess no real insights into their child's emotions or histories. Aside from the presentation, including the emotion-based argument claiming the report was intended to cause fear instead of revealing factual insights. I see this as a win when WPATH knows that these data are a threat to their questionable standards of care, and they had to get their audience to hear about it with their spin first. In summary, it was interesting to hear people who promote the sterilization of children and vulnerable adults attempt to defend their faulty ideas. Most of what I heard were blatant lies and the bending or omission of truth. They openly said they were afraid of the attacks on trans people, which are simply bills to protect minors from high-risk procedures. And they tried unsuccessfully to discredit the thoughts, ideas, and experiences of many outspoken critics of transgender medicine. Their quick-paced deliveries and limited questions times further hinted at the awareness of a growing scrutiny for those opposed to the gender transition of minors and vulnerable adults. This means your voices are being heard and making a difference. Continue standing up for your beliefs. It's causing those pushing these transitions to release their stance. This isn't the one I thought it was, but this is. I thought this was a good article. I thought this was a different one that I sent over. Whoops. My hand is going numb. I know exactly, Vicky. Leave our kids alone. I thought that was a different article that I had sent. I'm sorry. Let me check over here. I put the link in there. We'll put the we'll put the links for these in there too. Let me go over here to my phone real quick and see if I had a different article. That wasn't the one that I thought it was. Oh, this I definitely want to show this though. There's a speech by one of the detransitioners, Chloe Cole, that was mentioned in that article. And I would like to be able to play it because I think that the people that have gone through this, that their voices also matter in this. And I don't feel like their voices are being elevated enough. Let me just send this over. And we'll listen to Chloe Cole's speech that she did today. Let me just get this to catch up with me. And let me add it over here. I think it's really important to listen to the detransitioners that have gone through this, and the medicalization and how things have happened with their, with their family and their, their experience of going through it. I think it's really, really important to not just, not discount them and actually listen. Actually, Joe, yeah, what I'm going to be showing you right now is one of the girls, Chloe Cole, and she's going to talk about her story and how there's several that have come out, and I support them and talk with them that have detransitioned, and I want to get somebody to come on the show, but I don't want to really approach them and say, "Hey, do you want to talk about the trauma that you've gone through?" So I'm gonna reach out through a different channel, a different way, and just try to see if I can get somebody that is speaking out that would be willing to come on and talk to us about it. But this is Chloe. She spoke out today.
Welcome the former transgender child, detransitioner Chloe Cole.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for attending today. I'm really happy to be here in this beautiful state. My name is Chloe Cole, and I am a former transgender teen from California and an advocate for the well-being of children and vulnerable adults. I've been speaking out for about a year on my experience transitioning from a girl to a boy during my childhood, and my journey back to life as a happier woman, warning people of the dangers of childhood medical transition and the widespread cycle of abuse of young, vulnerable patients who deserve so much better. As a recap, or for those who are unfamiliar with my story, I began feeling that I was a boy at 12 years old, then was administered puberty blockers and male hormones at 13, given a double mastectomy, or the removal of my breast, at 15 years old. Then I made the decision to stop transitioning less than a year later because I discovered that I had deep regrets about this and that I had a strong maternal instinct and a desire to have children one day. And I'd like to add that since we were talking about sex ed earlier, at the age that I was, I didn't even know about things like ovulation or what fallopian tubes or what a cervix were yet. And yet I was being allowed to make decisions that would affect those organs and those processes in my body. I didn't even know that there are 4 cycles to there are 4 stages in the menstrual cycle. All I knew was that there was a period, that I didn't like it, and that somehow afterward I could get pregnant. But it's pretty common for people who, mind you, have likely never opened a Bible in their lives to quote a random out of context piece of scripture to tell me that I'm being hateful by discouraging other youth from transitioning and shedding light on the reality of it to parents and adults. They often say to me things like, well, you're a Christian, right? Don't you know not to judge others and to be kind and love thy neighbor? And to that I say, to lie repeatedly and shamelessly to someone is the furthest you can get from love and kindness. It is not loving to lie to someone about reality. It is not loving to give in to someone else's illusions for their momentary happiness. It has long been established that children do not have a fully developed ability to distinguish between fantasy and reality. Even older children and adolescents are susceptible to this. And it often manifests in, say, like feelings of superiority or grandeur or invincibility. It's common for children's wishes to change on a whim, and how they feel one day often changes the next. Those of you who are parents or simply have lived through adolescence probably know this all too well. For that reason, it's neglectful to raise a child without guidance, to allow them to live in fantasy, and yet somehow expect them to have the same level of understanding as an adult, and to look the other way when either they unwittingly choose for themselves or an adult pushes them into a course of treatment which will permanently disrupt their emotional, cognitive, physical, and sexual development. It goes without saying that a child's greatest right in this world is to grow up happy, healthy, and with the ability to live life to the fullest. And yet we are living in a world where perfectly physically healthy children are being mutilated and castrated, losing their adult sexual function and pleasure and fertility before they have a complete grasp on what any of that is. An overwhelming majority of those who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria have also been diagnosed with or have symptoms of other pre-existing conditions such as depression or anxiety or eating or body image disorders, learning and perceptive disorders, family-related trauma, or a history of sexual abuse. And my doctors knew very well that I had several glaring red flags. I struggled to socialize and fit in with my peers. I was previously diagnosed with ADHD and had very distinct symptoms of autism. I began puberty rather young, and I had body dysmorphia. And yet somehow, I made it through the system. All these problems I had were either dismissed as having no influence on my gender dysphoria whatsoever, or possibly even being caused by me having been born in the wrong body. I do not necessarily think that the diagnosis of dysphoria was erroneous, but the treatment was incredibly inappropriate given my age and my circumstances. It became clear that my condition was rapidly and sharply declining over time, and that the treatment was not making me any better. And yet my depression and feelings of loneliness were always attributed to my gender by my doctors, which further pushed me down this path until I just couldn't bear it any longer. I had not a single clue what detransitioning was going to be like. All I knew was that I lost almost everything I had before: a community, my friends at school, the support from my doctors even, any stability in my life. And I was going to have to pick up the pieces of my own life completely by myself. I had no guidance from any of the doctors who put me in this position in the first place. My gender specialist just told me that my deep post-transition regret was nothing more than another part of my gender journey. My endocrinologist failed to instruct me on how to stop taking the hormones or address the risk of doing so. And my surgeon, when I told him about the healing of my skin grafts regressing and leaving open wounds on my chest, he failed to diagnose the cause and told me instead to just put Vaseline on it to keep it moist or whatever. And it didn't make sense to me at the time, but I thought that because, well, he's my surgeon, and he's probably done this to many other patients, so he's probably seen this before. I took his advice. It gave me a skin infection. My family and I trusted him, and the rest of our doctors, and they betrayed us. In short, I had to figure out how to detransition completely on my own. This is a pretty common thread amongst detransitioners, actually. Whereas with transitioning, there's a clear pipeline from social transition to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, and then eventually surgery. There are no guidelines or codes in healthcare in place for those of us who regret or decide to stop transition. The possibility of desistance or regret, or even how to go back, were never discussed prior to undergoing transition. So when it happens, it leaves you with a sense of hopelessness. We have no idea how many people kill themselves because of the trap that gender transition ensnares them in, and medical institutions don't seem to care. You're probably wondering where my parents were at while I was suffering through this, and why they signed off on this course of treatment, or why I don't blame them. But I believe that they did the best with what they were given. The doctors failed them just as badly as they failed me. Of course, there's mothers and fathers out there who transition their children out of selfishness and a lust for control. But the vast majority of parents are force-fed lies and emotionally manipulated by doctors into believing that they have only two choices: to have a dead cisgender child or a living, happy transgender child. But this couldn't be any further from the truth. My mom and dad were told that I would kill myself if I weren't allowed to transition. But I wasn't suicidal until after I began taking testosterone. I wasn't suicidal over the possibility of not transitioning, but I was fearful of what could happen. This practice of mutilation and deception is tearing children and their families apart and infecting the educational and medical institutions that we once trusted and held in high esteem. This has been going on for far too long. It's incredibly sinister, but there is hope. More and more people every day are awakening and fighting back. This is a battle that will not last for much longer. The tides are turning in the favor of God and all that is good. And though there will still be children getting hurt during this fight, and we can't protect everyone, there will be so many more vulnerable souls who will be rescued from this fate in the coming decades. I ask you all to continue spreading the word, to speak the truth without fear in the face of adversary, because thousands of youth need to stand up. Let's work hard and make sure that what happened to me and thousands of other children never happens again. Thank you all.
So that's Chloe Cole. If you are on Twitter, I know she's on Twitter and she might be on other social medias. I'm not sure. But her story, unfortunately, is one of many of the detransitioners that I follow. I spoke with one the other night in a Twitter Spaces, and she told me that there's a medical code for everything, right? There's a medical code if you go in there and you have your blood pressure checked, you have whatever it is, there's medical codes for everything. There is no medical code for detransitioners. And people will tell you that there's not many of them, but I see the numbers just growing and growing, the numbers of detransitioners. And I wish that her story was, unique, but it's almost identical every single time. These medical providers are saying, do you want a dead child, or do you want a living one of the opposite gender? And they say this to parents over and over again. They're taught to say this. And it's really alarming if somebody said that to me. Of course, of course I want my living child. It's an emotional blackmail. What's happening? And it's heartbreaking because the children and the vulnerable are the ones that are suffering of this. And I'm not saying that there's not adults that, you know what I mean, that eventually would need to transition as adults. But we shouldn't be letting children do this. We shouldn't be just rushing them on this path where, they're medicalized for the rest of their lives. It's heartbreaking. This breaks my heart as a parent, as a mother. Like, it breaks my heart. Like that kids are going through this. They need actual care. They need love. We're failing kids as a society, and it's heartbreaking. There's no hate in this. There's no hate in wanting kids to not become medicalized and be seen as for profit in this and get in the cog. I mean, like, literally, there's medical care for the rest of their lives once they start this type of thing, unless they decide to detransition. And it's really hard for the the ones that I've heard speak about it. Like, it's really hard to decide to even detransition. They say if you even question your gender at all, then that means that's leaning towards the gender ideology, and it's swallowing these kids up whole. And I've listened to their stories, and I've talked to them, and I support them. I don't say any of this out of hate. I don't say any of this out of being like a political angle in any way. This is a nonpartisan issue as far as I am concerned. I mean, they've compared this to, if a child had anorexia or bulimia. There's been a detransitioner that has spoken out about their own issue with body dysmorphia and how they suffered from that. And they wanted liposuction and they couldn't get that. They wouldn't let her go and have that for obvious reasons. But yet they allowed them to go and cut off perfectly healthy breasts of young girls. And they prescribe the medications, and these medications have a whole a laundry list of side effects, and they're not given informed consent. And yet here we are, the same thing that happened before, with doctors not getting, informed consent and actually treating the patients. And this is just happening everywhere. It's heartbreaking. Well, I think that we're gonna wrap it up here. We are having on the Dork Shaman this week, coming up on Tuesday. A new citizen journalist out there covering these issues on the ground. And we are having Emmeline Dowd come on Thursday, both at 9 p.m. Tuesday and Thursday this week. So 2 more interviews coming up. Emma is a returning guest. She was born intersex, and she has some great points of view. And I look forward to talking with the Dork Shaman. That's what he goes by on Twitter. And he's a citizen journalist who's been covering on the ground what's happening at pride parades and what happened to him personally when it comes to this ideology. So I hope that you guys will tune in for those very special guests. Yeah, exactly, Joe. Yeah. I wanted to have a reduction done when I was younger because of my back, and they said I would be a process. I'd have to go and do all this. It's crazy, but it's easy to get it done for one reason, but for another reason, it's not. So please spread the word about what's happening. Stand up. Speak up if you can. I know it's hard. I know that a lot of people are getting attacked over this. But we got to have each other's back. And I feel like the tides are really turning on this issue. So please do it with love and kindness and support. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Steve?
Nope. See you guys next time.